Hello. Oh, hey, they work. Okay, are we live? Yes? Okay, awesome, we're live. All right, it is like, I don't know, probably 5:01, and I'll call this meeting to order. If we could get a roll call, please.
Can you hear me? Counselor Cassett?
She's excused, sorry.
Thank you. Counselor Lindell?
Here.
Counselor Rivera?
Here.
Counselor Vieira?
Is it?
And Counselor Romero-Worth.
I'm here as well. All right, we have a quorum. If we could get a motion to approve the agenda, assuming there are no changes.
No changes at this time, Madam Chair.
Okay, any changes from the committee?
Approve. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the agenda. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The agenda is approved. We move to the consent agenda. Are there items the committee would like to hear tonight? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple questions on item D as in dog.
D as in dog. Anybody else? Councilor Lindell, sorry.
Yeah, B as in boy.
B as in boy. All right, is there a motion to approve this agenda? As amended?
As amended, second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as amended. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? That motion passes. We move now to approval of the Finance Committee minutes from May 16th. Are there any changes to those minutes from staff?
No changes, Madam Chair.
Any changes from the committee? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Oh, actually, we need a motion first.
Move
You
for
guys skipped
approval.
a step. Oops. Is there a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
A motion approval to approve the May 16th minutes. All those in favor, aye. Anybody opposed? That motion passes as well. All right, we are on to the items pulled from consent. Councilwoman Lindell, you you pulled item B, request for approval of a service contract in the total amount of $1,517,257.50 for Tyler Munis upgrade support services and payroll support for the term of 12 months with Cyber Pathway. And we have our IT Director, Manuel Gonzalez. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'll turn it over to you, Counselor.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick questions. I see that it's a sole source, and it looks like it's a company that we've been working with. You know, my concern with this is how familiar, we've been through so many times that we work with outside consultants and they disappoint us. Do we have, aside from we've worked with them, do we have references from any other municipalities or anybody else that have undertaken this kind of work with them?
Madam Chair, Councilor Lindell, Cyber Pathway has been providing support to the City of Santa Fe in payroll and HCM since we went live in HCM in January of 2000.
2000 and what?
2000, January 2000. 2020, sorry.
We get a little closer to the mic. I'm sorry, I can't
It's
hear.
January 2020.
Thank you.
They have the expertise. They're familiar with Munis. They're familiar with the City of Santa Fe process. They did not assist us with the implementation of Munis, but we're very confident in their expertise. They have clients across the country. I do not have references for them, but I could obtain that if you would like.
Okay. You know, it's a lot of money for a year, $1.5 million. I just get concerned that we haven't talked to anyone else that they did these kinds of upgrades with. I know that we've worked with them. It sounds like we've been happy with them, but a sole source contract is that's putting $1.5 million worth of faith in them without talking to anybody else about how they completed their tasks in this particular arena. Just have concerns about that. I'm going to support this, but these kinds of contracts make me nervous because we've had other groups that we've contracted with, and it's been a nightmare. And we spent tons of money with them, and we still didn't get to where we were trying. We didn't get from A to B. So those are my comments, Chair.
Madam Chair, Councilman Lindell.
Mr. Gonzalez?
So out of that 1.5, 200,000 is for continued payroll support, which they've been doing for the past 2 years.
Could you speak into the mic closer?
200,000 is for payroll support. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
For payroll support that they've been doing for the past 2 years. 1.3 is for the Munis upgrade. We felt like it would cost more money and it cost more time if we brought in another vendor. Like I said, they're familiar with our Munis system, they're familiar with the city process, and with the aggressive timeline we have for the upgrade, this was the best route for the city of Santa Fe.
Well, I believe that. I'm just a little concerned about where we've ended up before in these situations. One other question I have is, why did we wait so long? Because we only have until November to get this done, right?
Our target go-live date is late January of next year.
Okay, I thought that the system that we're under right now, the support for it stopped in November.
The sunset date for the version we're on was in November of this year. We were able to negotiate with Tyler to push that back to January.
Okay, I hope they get it done. Thank you.
Counselor, whoops, your name plate is switched around. I almost called you Counselor Garcia, Counselor Rivera, and I know better.
Madam Chair. Just wanted to ask our finance department what they think of the system and the payroll system and how it's working. Has it given us any problems? Does it seem to be living up to what we expected from it?
To the event on Zoom. We have had Cyber Pathways helping with us since we did the upgrade into HCM with Munis. There's still some issues that we need their support with and some anomalies that, some unusual activities. Like a year, not even a year ago, about 7 months ago, we had Kronos went down and we had to adopt a very manual process, and they helped us with that. We're in the process as part of the 23 budget. We budgeted a payroll officer, so we're going to get an additional person in the payroll office, and I think that will help as well. But I do think that we need this kind of support for at least the next year.
And Kronos is the automatic clocking in, clocking out system, is that correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, Kronos is the timekeeping system, which is separate from the Munis payroll system. And I think, those different technical issues, I think that our CIO is more appropriate to answer that question. But yes, they're two separate systems.
Okay, do you have anything to add to that, Mr. Badano?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, yes, I just want to add that issues that we've had that I've been here long enough now to realize were more functional than the system. It was about learning the system, adapting to the system. I think in a number of areas, I think users were reluctant to switch over to the way this system works compared to the older systems. So that they're what I would call more functional. And I think it's really important to divide between what are functional user issues and training issues, and what are actually system issues. The system has done, when I've tried to work with the system, it's done whatever I've needed it to do, but it takes a while to get used to the system, and I think doing the upgrade, there's a plan to do a lot more training this go around than the last.
And is the whole city utilizing Kronos?
That I would have to defer to.
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, Santa Fe PD and Santa Fe Fire are not using Kronos at this time.
And what's the reasoning?
The city of Santa Fe went live in Kronos in 2017 and did not bring PD and fire over. We've been working on that. We're really close to bringing fire over, but we're going to wait until we upgrade Kronos to bring PD over. We're upgrading to a new platform in Kronos that better suits Santa Fe PD.
All right, and just quickly, you know, what are we going to be receiving with the upgrades?
For which upgrade are we talking about, Councilor?
Munis upgrade, I guess.
We're going from version 11.3 to 19.3, which is 9 generations behind. So we're going into one of the latest versions that Tyler has, which will allow us to build out APIs which communicate with other platforms throughout the city, including Kronos.
I don't know if you can answer this or not, but what would be the cost difference if we upgraded versions every time they had one available versus waiting till we're 8 versions behind?
Well, it wasn't that we waited 8 versions behind. We went live in that many generations behind.
Okay.
So when we went live in 2019, the city decided to go with version 11.3, which is 2011. It wasn't that we waited to upgrade. We went live in an old version.
So is the plan to, from here on forward, to stay current with the upgrades that are coming out?
Councilor Rivera, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions from the committee?
Approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this item. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? That motion passes. We are on to item D, request for approval of a collective bargaining agreement between the City of Santa Fe and the Santa Fe Police Officers Association for FY23 in the amount of $2,251,13 for sworn and civilian bargaining unit employees. We have Deputy Chief of Police Ben Valdez with us, and Councilwoman Villarreal, you pulled this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Deputy Chief Valdez, for being with us and the team here. Just some questions about, really just clarifying questions as I try to find here, related to finance. I have other questions that related to lateral hires and just some language, but I'll ask about that in quality of life, because I think that's more pertinent. So when I was looking at the document, and thank you for sending me the red line document, I think it was helpful to see what was adjusted. And so I wasn't quite sure. So the non-sworn positions in that document, it didn't reflect any 16% increase of pay. It was just the sworn officers. Is that how that was negotiated, or did I miss something?
Madam Chair, Councilor, or Councilwoman Villarreal, so it's 16% across the board for all of our sworn staff and also for our civilian staff, which are our crime scene technicians, those that are not doing, arrest power type work. But it's 60% across the board for their for salary. It's going to be a base rate increase for our sworn. For those that are currently in the position now as a non-sworn, it's a 16% salary increase.
So like animal control officers and folks in the investigation, investigation techs, or what did you call them? Sorry.
Our crime scene techs, our evidence techs, animal services officers, they would also get a 16%, but theirs is a salary increase. So those that are in the position will get that 16%. If we have any new incumbents that join us after the new fiscal year in July 1, they will come in at the current rate of pay for the hourly wage.
Got it. Okay, so the ones that were reflected in the CBA are needed to adjust because they're base increases versus salary increases?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, so for our sworn staff, what we've done to remain competitive is we've raised the base rate up. So anyone that comes into that position, whether it's after July 1 or not, they will come at that base rate. So that's for all police officer ones through sergeant, that'll get that base rate increase. For our civilian staff, we would love to do that, not only for our POA members, but also for our AFSCME staff, because it makes us competitive and we can stay competitive no matter if they're with us right now or if they're just joining us. But for those that have been with the organization that are non-sworn, whether they're on probation or not, they will be receiving that 60% salary increase as a gesture of appreciation for all the hard work that they did, especially those that have served and continue service during the pandemic.
Do you all anticipate that the non-sworn staff would then have a base increase eventually? Maybe not this time, but just curious about that because I was looking at the rates and they're fairly low as well.
Councilwoman, you hit it right on the head because that's one thing we're facing with our AFSCME members, in particularly our records techs, admin assistants. Because of their pay, it's been really difficult for us to fill those positions. We would always support and we would appreciate a base rate increase for our AFSCME staff and also for our civilian staff. That's what's going to keep us competitive. That's what's going to allow us to onboard and also maintain the staff that we have within our organization. It's just going to come down to if there's funding to support that. But for us, we would certainly be in support of that. You hit it right on the head. Some of these positions, if you look at the base rate where they come in, it's very difficult to, again, start a career. And this is what we're asking people to do when they join our organization is to spend decades with us because that helps us out with that institutional knowledge that can be built and also the expertise that's gained throughout years of service.
Thank you. And did you say AFSCME staff within PD, they get only the 8%?
That's correct. And also our non-union, so like our police cadets and our captains, actually lieutenants and above, would also fall under that 8% salary increase that was granted.
Thank you for that clarification. The other question I had, let's see. I was hoping maybe you could explain a little bit more about the car plan, because the memo didn't exactly make sense, but then when I went to the document you sent me that was the red line, then I understood the language that you took out, and maybe it was just that, if you could explain this, because in the memo it says the change language that all officers and non-sworn personnel will not utilize vehicles more than 55 radius miles. So did you mean that they cannot take vehicles home beyond the 55-mile radius? Is that what that was getting at?
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, yes. So with that language, that means unless they have express permission, whether it's being sent to a training or attending a meeting that is relation to work, that radius is only for them to take their vehicle for a take-home program.
So that was changed from 45 radius miles to 55 to capture that small percentage you said for the 0.10 of a mile and 1.3 miles outside of the current radius. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilwoman, it's to help those that are currently with us that exist or have homes that exist outside of the authorized take-home radius. One thing we're seeing is we are kind of in a position that we may lose officers because they're outside of the take-home radius. They try to do the commute. Some of them, have specialty positions, detectives, other trained positions that are a huge benefit to us. But it's also to remain competitive. As we all know, with the current housing situation, with the challenges here in Santa Fe, it's also affecting other areas. And in discussion with personnel from Rio Rancho, even their housing market is really facing some challenges when it comes to capacity and what's available on the market. What we're seeing is with our current radius, a lot of the homes that are within that radius It's pretty competitive with East Santa Fe Living in East Albuquerque. So what we're looking to do is to expand it so we can include areas that are affordable for those that have professional law enforcement, whether they be sworn or non-sworn. But we've also seen a number of candidates that were lateral officers that were interested in joining our team, but because they currently live outside that radius, they were not willing to come over at this point. But they said if that does change, that we would really have a good opportunity for us to onboard several law enforcement officers that have experience. The last count that we had, we're looking at about 7 to 8 that were interested, that want to come over, that live outside the current radius, that are experienced lateral officers. Those are great benefit because we can get them trained and on the street within 6 weeks. And it's really, really helpful for us to get them in because, we have a number of vacancies. Today we sit at 30, down from 35 last week. But still, we have quite a ways to go to fill those positions to make sure we have sufficient staffing to make sure our people can operate in a safe manner.
Thank you. And just a quick question, that language, it was removed from the CBA. It says 60 roadway miles distance for officers and non-sworn personnel hired before April 1st, 2012. Was that taken out because of that date? I don't understand why that language was taken out.
Councilman, but yeah, so it was just try to get the language all into one equal plane. Right now, with our officers that were hired before that date, there's a small number of them. Even with this change, they will still be within the authorized take-home radius. There's one individual that will benefit because as the crow flies, they're within 45 radius miles. So for that individual, they've been having to park at a secured lot for the last at least 7, 8 years. So it's going to benefit that individual.
Say more about that secured lot, because you did put that in the memo, and I didn't, if you could expound upon that, I didn't quite understand that.
Absolutely. So for some of our staff in Albuquerque, they're parking at the substation for the Albuquerque Police Department. And what I can share with you is Albuquerque is one of our biggest competitors. And from what they're sharing with me, not a day goes by that they don't get a recruiting card on their cruiser or their personal card. And that is very alarming for us because all it takes is one day for them to say, you know what, maybe the drive is too long for me, and instead of going out to my car, I'm going to call in, I'm going to walk inside and see what they can do for me here in Albuquerque. So having our people park at our competitors, again, it's a great service they've been doing for us, but again, it's to their benefit. And I can assure you, if we had people parking at our parking lot, I would also have my recruiters go out there and doing the same to tell them how great it is to work for our agency and how they can spare the drive to Albuquerque. So that's always been an area of concern for us, but...
Are they parking, though, because of the radius, so they park at the lot?
Correct.
And then get in their own vehicle and drive the rest of the mileage to home? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Thanks for clarifying, because I couldn't understand what you meant by that, but I understand that that's a little awkward, too, to be able to park at Albuquerque PD. That probably doesn't make sense, so. And then with those changes, with the vehicles and the radius miles, I guess I did see that as a fiscal impact, because it will increase the fuel use, and then simultaneously we do have hybrid vehicles. So I guess I just wanted to see if you could explain that a little bit more about why you don't think it's a fiscal impact.
Absolutely. So with our hybrid vehicles, we're looking to double our fuel mileage. We're going from 12 to 14 miles per gallon to 25 to 26. So it's going to eliminate that additional incurred cost for fuel mileage cost. Another thing we've done in the past 6 to 7 years is we transitioned over to synthetics. So the downtime that we have to go get maintenance used to be 2,500 miles. Now it's every 5,000 miles to get an oil change. That expense that we're going to incur in time or whatever it may be with wear and tear on the tires that does not reflect in the fuel mileage cost is going to be offset by us not having to have an extra commuting day for someone to come in to cover a shift on overtime. So it's going to balance itself out. There's going to be no fiscal impact, and the way I feel with us continuing to invest in hybrid vehicles, we're actually going to still realize the cost savings because of the mileage that we're going to save with the fuel expenses. Even as the cost goes up with fuel right now, it's really in our favor they went to hybrids, especially with it being $4.25, $4.30 a gallon. So it's a good thing we did that, because if not, then, again, we'd be paying pretty much double for the fuel costs that we would if we didn't go with a hybrid model.
Thank you. I think that's all the financial questions I have. Some of the internal affairs questions and the lateral hires, I'll just ask at quality of life. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Councilor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, DC Valdez and the Police Officers Association, I wanted to congratulate you on getting a contract done. It's nice to see it here, and looks like both of you are here in support of this, so that's always a great thing. I had a question. So now 16% base rate increase for police sergeants, and then your next staff level, which I assume is non-union, will only get an 8%. Are we going to see some compaction issues off the start with the difference in the percentages?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, there's still a good gap between our police sergeant and our police lieutenant. It's about $7 difference right now. So that'll be helpful for us, because one thing we don't want is, even if there's a sergeant that's making shift differential on graveyard at 10%, that there's no compaction with the base rate for that day shift lieutenant. There was a time where we did have that compaction due to shift differential, but right now we're looking good. Now, as we move forward, we'll have to continue to evaluate that and just make sure that we keep that distance. We want to keep at least that no less than $6 of the difference between our sergeants and our lieutenants to avoid that compaction issue.
Did you guys also look at increasing your overtime budget? Now that the salaries increase, there's inherent overtime in the work that you do. So have you looked at raising that part of the budget as well?
Councilor Rivera, we did increase our overtime budget by a percentage with anticipation that we would be going into collective bargaining, and with some of these other costs that we knew they were going to be built in, other expenses, we put a percentage on that, but I can follow up and give you the exact amount of the difference from last year versus this year if you like.
Okay, that would be great. And then I noticed on page 2 of your memo, the second bullet point says change eligibility requirement for a retired police officer to test for sergeant. Now, I imagine that's there because we're hearing that maybe because of the increases, retired officers may want to come back to improve their PERA status. Is that something that you guys are hearing in the police department?
Councilor Rivera, the change that we made was mainly to address the lateral officers that we're getting from other agencies. We received lieutenants, sergeants from other agencies, and what we're seeing is that having them wait for 7 years with our department to test for sergeant, by that time, all that skill, all the benefits they bring to the table are going to be out the door. So what we're doing is leveling the playing field to where if they have at least 5 years, which will make them a senior police officer, that makes one criteria of eligibility for them. The second part is they need 2 years of service with the police department at that rank. What that does is it's the same amount of time that we would need for a new cadet who would join our agency for them to make it to eligibility to test for sergeant. But in that case, if someone has that prior experience and they could be a benefit, it only allows them to test and compete for that position, which is a huge benefit, especially when you have people that are really established with the area agencies. That could be a great benefit to us. If they know, hey, I can go to Santa Fe Police, I have 10 years experience, I could serve 2 years, learn what I need to do for the job and test for sergeant, that's another method for us to help encourage them to come over to join our department. A lot of agencies have looked at their testing criteria as well and had to make adjustments just because right now we have a young department, we're getting these lateral officers, and if we ice them for 7 years, we're never going to realize the benefit of their experience if they join our team. And again, it's just for them to have an opportunity to test. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will promote. They're still going to have to compete against our staff that may have more experience in that position or with the department. So they're going to have to be up on it to go and be able to compete.
I understand the lateral police officer. What I'm talking about was a requirement for a retired police officer to test for sergeant. Is that retired from another state or retired from within the state that may want to come back?
So if we have that language, and let's say there's a change to the PRA rules to allow them to come back and let's say pull their retirement but also gain it, they would have to put their time in to be able to test. This avoids the issue that was occurring in some, not only police agencies, but in government in general, where someone would retire one day in one position, let's say as a deputy cabinet secretary, come back on Monday, and now they are retired, but then pulling a second income in the same position that they just held. They would still have to come in, just like our other laterals, at a minimum, spend 2 years there if they do decide to do that, but the rules to para would apply. So if they come back now, they would have to suspend their retirement, and they'd have to work out to see if that additional pay would go towards their retirement to help them realize a greater increase. But again, there's also a great game with that because a lot of people are leaving at year 20 or 22 where they can come back and, again, give that experience that we have on the street. So especially with someone that was with our agency that would like to further their time of service to the community.
This language is just anticipating potential changes to state law.
It was established like that, and we kind of kept that language in there. My understanding is, I believe those that left in 2013, prior to June 30th of 2013, they can still pull their retirement, but then also get a second job within a para organization. So that's in there. Do I foresee people from 2013 coming back? I don't know, maybe. But we just kept the language in there just in case. Makes it a bit easier for us. But again, they still have to abide by the rules of para, whatever they may be.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Other questions? On page 5 of the agreement, you have a typo in section 3, uniforms and clothing, paragraph B. You got an extra 0 there. I think it's bargaining unit employees will be allocated $650 annually, correct? So if we can just get rid of that 1 0. And then I just feel like I need to comment on the having officers park at the Albuquerque substation so as not to exceed the radius in which they can go with their take-home cars. And I guess I would just point out that it's very nice of the Albuquerque Police Department to allow our officers to park there. Certainly, they are, you know, a competitor, as you say, and I think we do need to pay attention to what they're doing in Albuquerque and, you know, stay competitive. But I would also say that there's more that goes into an officer's decision about which team they're on than just the drive. And I know you have said before that one of the reasons our officers like to live in Rio Rancho is that they don't like to live in the community that they police. So I just want to acknowledge there's some complexity in the decision that goes into where you decide to work, and it's not just parking at the substation. So just a comment on that. Do we have a motion on this item? Is there a motion? Did we have a motion? I don't think we have a motion.
I'll move for approval.
A motion, and is there any more discussion? Motion and a second to approve this item. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anybody opposed? That motion passes. All right, thank you. We are done with the consent agenda. We'll go to the presentation. We have our interim assistant finance director with us tonight, Mr. Ricky Bejarano, to do the FY21 audit status update. We are going to do, and I don't know, I guess we didn't get this presentation in the packet. Is that true? Or do I have an old packet? Okay. So maybe at the end of this meeting, we can email the committee all the slides. We're going to continue going over the update on the City of Santa Fe Fraud Prevention Engagement McCard Accounting Report. And it turns out that the next two sections, the slides are not as long as the first section, and I think we can get them both done in this meeting. And so I'll just kick it over to you, Mr. Bejarano, and you can take it away.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I'll start with the audit update. The items that, or the plan that the State Auditor's Office requested was submitted in time on the 27th, and we today received a response that it was received and that they would be in touch with us after they review it as to what the next steps are and setting a date for us to meet again. We've made progress with the cash reconciliation. We're down to about $1 million, give or take. We're also working on formatting and creating the financial statements, which in the past have been created by the auditors themselves. This year, we're going to have the firm Beasley Mitchell go ahead and do the financial statements, getting them closer to in-house. Beasley Mitchell is one of the contractors that's helping us with the audit prep, and with the intention of next year, or well, for 23 at least, to have the financial statements back to in-house. So it's one step closer. The statement of expenditures of federal awards is still being revised, and the piece that is being worked on is matching the revenues to the expenditures, which is what will be required for the auditors to accept that. With that, I stand for questions on the audit itself.
Questions on the first part of this? Okay, I think we can dive into the update on the McCard report. And maybe you can just help us, with that slide. So, oops, it went away. So at our last meeting, just want to orient the committee on where we are, but I need that slide back.
One moment. I brought no mouse. My apologies.
No worries. That one, yeah. All right, so at our last meeting, we did the slides associated, your computer doesn't want to work, with the finance and accounting department.
Apologies. Yeah.
Right, that one. Okay. With the finance and accounting department, tonight we're going to do the slides associated with grant accounting and accounts payable. And again, they're not as many, and so I think we can get through them all.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for your patience. In response to where we are with the McCard report, one of their big issues with grant accounting was that capital expenditures under grants couldn't always be properly tracked, and there wasn't, each department had their own system or has their own system currently, and that's creating part of this problem. What we need to do is consolidate all these controls into one and have a citywide policy and procedures that are comparable and that accommodate each department. One of the things that will help with that is when we hire the compliance officer that you approved in the new budget. This will be the charge of the compliance officer to ensure that these different areas are uniform in the way that they're applying the grant accounting and accounting for the capital assets. So that's one item that wasn't completely fixed. I think a number of departments did go on and do their own policies and procedures, but they're different and they don't follow things all the way through citywide. Second issue was employees applying for grant, or essentially various program managers, I believe, were applying for grants without consulting with other sections of the city, without consulting with the finance department in some cases. And so you'd have grants out there that finance didn't know they needed to be complying with certain requirements, and all of a sudden they'd appear. That, again, will be the charge as far as creating policies and procedures will be the charge of the compliance officer when they're brought on board. And we're not waiting just for that office, so we are, as we can, addressing issues as they go. But what we need is a uniform policy, uniform procedures across the board. The third one is essentially ongoing. It did touch the last audit. There are, some departments are doing better than others in complying with requirements, reviewing expenditures for grant requirements, but again, it needs to be uniform, it needs to be across the board, and it needs to be applied citywide. The last finding, I believe, dinged the city more for not having a good reconciliation process in place. That's part of the internal control procedures that you'd have in place under normal circumstances, and we are working on that. And again, it'll be up to the compliance officer to enforce. This everybody finds interesting, and it gets questioned sometimes that vacations should be mandatory. What mandatory vacations do in a system, especially within the finance department, when people are gone and not allowed to be corresponding, firms do this where if you're off, you're off. You don't correspond, you don't call unless there's an emergency. And what it does is it allows then supervisors, other members of the team to have to do sometimes tasks within that person's job description or to address issues while that person's out. And it allows more transparency and understanding. And it also encourages the team to be corresponding with each other and is essentially advising people of what is going on within their job description. It's a good policy. This one would only require 5 consecutive work days, excluding holidays. It actually, in my opinion, and most entities would go for at least a 2-week minimum. The other thing it does is it keeps annual leave balances from building up excessively. With that, I stand for questions on the grants portion.
Do we want to, I guess, let me ask the committee, do we want to take these section by section, or do you want to hear the whole thing and then we can go back to it?
Madam Chair, I did have a question on grants.
Okay.
That I
All right, so I'll go to Councilwoman Villarreal, and Mr. Bejarano, if you could just bring the mic a little closer. I cleared the hall out there, but it just, with the air conditioning and everything and the masks, it's not that you have one, but my mask seems to be affecting my hearing, so if you wouldn't mind, that'd be great. Councilwoman Villarreal.
My mask definitely affects my hearing. It's connected, and I'm not making a joke. I can't hear things as well with my mask on. I actually can't see very well, but I'm like, am I getting old? But I can't really see the screen. So if we had this this presentation, if you can email it to us, that would be great. There is a way to do the screen as like the slide, but I don't want to mess up anything, so there's a way to like make it the full screen. But anyway, the question I had was about the compliance officer for grant accounting, and you said once that person comes online that they will oversee the grant accounting tracking system for the most part. I guess my question to you is, in the past, the most recent past, we agreed on funding for a grant manager position. It was approved, and then it was filled, I think, by somebody, and then I don't know if that person left, and it was a different type of job. So maybe you could distinguish between the two?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, that's correct. As far as filling the position, we only filled it on an interim basis, and we're trying to get somebody in there permanently. and that has been advertised. It may need to be re-advertised to get more candidates. And the difference between the grants accounting manager and the compliance officer is that I'll start with the grants manager or accounting manager. That's strictly the accounting for grants and maintaining and ensuring that things are filed on time, doing the accounting that's specific to those grants, especially federal grants, but we get different grants. We get grants from the state, and then we share grants, let's say, with the county. And that's strictly an accounting duty. Whereas with the compliance officer it would be citywide and keeping track of the various grants, contracts that we have out there, and ensuring that we're following them in accordance with the provisions of that grant and/or contract, whatever the instrument is. It's a lot broader, but it brings things more uniformly and ensures, for example, when we have policies and procedures for federal grants, while each grant is unique and different, as far as the compliance, what needs to be done for compliance and/or reporting is usually very similar. And the role of this position is citywide and to ensure that there's a common calendar that we can look at, let's say, June and say, okay, these are all the reports that are due. These are all the compliance requirements that we have across citywide, and to ensure that we're keeping pace with everything. It's usually it is, and it will be advertised as a higher level position. I think it would be probably at the level that we consider an officer, because it requires a lot of experience, it requires a lot of knowledge with varied grants, whether they be federal or state or other sources. And it would also delve into, once the contracts are set, to ensure that we're meeting the requirements and any reporting that we need with those contracts.
Okay, thank you. And then the grants accounting manager, are they under the supervision of the compliance officer?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, no, they would be, basically the grants accountant is going to be under the controller, because it's strictly an accounting function. It's within the accounting, whereas the compliance will answer most likely to the finance director.
Okay, I guess I see them connected, at least communicating with each other.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, very much so. However, the compliance officer would be strictly compliance requirements. They wouldn't actually be doing any of the accounting. They would probably, the biggest role is to ensure compliance and reporting that back to either the finance director, the city manager, the deputy city manager, or even the mayor if compliance isn't happening. So the way it should be structured and will be structured is the person would go to the next level to their supervisor. If results aren't happening, they keep going up the chain to ensure compliance across citywide.
Okay, and then the compliance officer would probably work directly with those department leads on certain grants because they know that more intimately than probably the compliance officer would, because they're looking at it from a broader perspective.
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, the compliance officer is going to be required to work very directly with department heads, program managers, and even at the at the front level supervisory level to ensure compliance. The other thing that person would be doing is writing policies and procedures pertaining to compliance.
Okay.
And ensuring that they're done independently. I think it's very difficult a lot of times if you're running a large grant, let's say for the feds, that it's a day in, day out thing for the program managers. And compliance officers a lot of times are doing research. It could entail checking with other states, other municipalities to see what their procedures and policies are, taking the time to do things, as I mentioned, independently from the day-to-day that's happening with grants currently. It's become, I'll just use my own personal example. Northern College didn't have a compliance officer before I got there. We created one, and we came into compliance within a year with just about 100%.
Thank you. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Other questions on this section? I think we can move on.
The next area is accounts payable. Thank you. Just kidding. Excuse me. The next area is accounts payable. The first issue, the McCard report cited, our analysis of payment was made to vendors for fiscal year 16 at the time, reveals hundreds of check payments issued for amounts less than $5. I think, had I been around at the time, I probably would have pushed back on this. I know the McCard firm very well. They're very competent, but what we owe, we owe. If it's 50 cents and we have to issue a check for 50 cents, that's what we have to issue for unless there's a limitation by our bank. We owe what we owe. We can't excuse not paying. And the threshold for us might be very different from a vendor. They may need that $5. I think this is one that I personally am not terribly concerned about. It does cost a lot to write checks, and we are trying to get as many vendors on automated payments as possible. But regardless, when we do business with a vendor, we have to pay them for what they've given. So. Second one, accounts payable has been holding checks for vendors or employees to pick up. This is a process that has ceased. We run into this, I would say, since I've been here, all 143 days. We've run into it at least once every couple of weeks where someone wants to pick up a check or wants someone else to pick up the check for them. It's not allowed. We go through the process. We don't hold them anymore. Mailing day is mailing day. We cut checks on Thursdays for accounts payable, and we mail them out on Thursdays. If it's your check and you can be there on Thursday when they're available, that's about the only exception that would be made, and it's not really an exception. We just don't have to mail it out then, but they mail out with all the rest of the process. Payroll checks, of course, most of us are on direct deposit, and employees, of course, can pick up their checks if they're not. A new external fraud scheme at the time involved fraudsters sending ACH payment information for an existing vendor. Vendors can go in with their own passwords and whatnot and update their information in their profiles. The only thing that would allow this to continue is if the vendors either give their passwords or their sign-ons to somebody else. I think it's pretty tight. I think this one we are monitoring. We do need to write some policies and procedures around it and tighten them up, but for the most part, this would only happen currently under the Munis system if you gave away your ID and password. With that, that's the conclusion of my presentation.
So if I can, I just want to go back to that question of checks for smaller amounts. So, and it didn't occur to me when I talked to you, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, but why would we be, I mean, I agree, if we owe it, we owe it, but are they being issued for small amounts because we didn't get the amount right to begin with? And so then it seems odd.
Madam Chair, council members, we have very few of these checks.
Okay.
But it is possible that, for example, we're at the tail end of the year or from between months, we've charged up $10,000 with that particular vendor. Next month, we only charge $10. It's possible. It's not happening very, very often.
Okay. It just occurred to me. Questions on this section? Yes, Councilor Rivera.
Getting back to the check writing issue, we have, I don't know if every department has them, but they have their own credit card system now, right? So they don't have to wait for a check or do cash. Why don't they pay their smaller bills with their credit card and then just work it out after that?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, I believe you're referring to the P cards?
Yes.
Yes, and a number of the departments do use those and take advantage of that. But it's possible that we could charge, that's the only charge for the vendor that month, even on that P card. The P card is paid through the bank, and that is a more efficient way to do it, but sometimes it's not possible. It just depends on the vendor.
And it's been a while since we even heard about the P cards, but I assume that is working well and no problems with it?
Madam Chair, Councilor Rivera, we do have some issues and we need to tighten the process more. In my opinion, we have too many out there, is my personal opinion, but that's not based on a review that we haven't had time to do, but we will be looking at those closely. If I may, the one thing that I'm also recalling that you had asked that I have not gotten back to you on is the machines where when we accept payments to run the checks through, if it can be pulled from the bank right then. We have that capability, but it's not currently being utilized because of the different systems that we have. Some can accommodate it, some not. So right now we aren't doing that. But it's another thing we're looking into doing it because that would be a lot more efficient.
Okay, and if you could email this presentation to the members of the committee today, that would be great. And possible, correct?
Very possible, Madam Chair.
Okay.
My apologies. It should have been mailed to the entire council already, and we'll do that this evening.
Okay. If you wouldn't mind, that would be terrific. Councilwoman Villarreal, you have a furrowed brow.
I have a question. The last presentation, we did ask for that, and,
Yeah, this slide deck is all one.
oh, got it.
So what I was actually hoping is that we could split it off and give you the first half of it, and I thought the second two parts were going to take longer, and they didn't. So now you've had it all, and you'll get it in one slide deck, and that'll save Mr. Bejarano some time and not having to divide up all those slides into different sections.
That works. Thank you.
Okay. I don't see any more questions.
Thank you.
So we will move on to matters from staff.
No matters from staff, Madam Chair.
Okay, matters from the committee. All right, our next meeting is Monday, June 20th, and we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.